So thank you very much. As the name had implied in your invitations, this was actually supposed to be a roundtable discussion on Pakistan's inflation woes. But somehow my colleagues at STPI thought of giving us the biggest hall in the hotel, in which they are telling me that the round table would have looked really odd with a few colleagues around the table. So hence, of course, converting the round table into a panel discussion. So this is just sort of a reconfiguration. I'm really honored that this session is being chaired by, of course, my former boss and mentor, Dr. Waqar Masood Khan Sahab. So thank you very much. He is advisor to Prime Minister on Finance, Government of Pakistan. Very illustrious career in the civil service and banking. Remained former federal finance secretary for a very long time. I'm also joined by Dr. Alia H. Khan, former Dean Faculty of Social Sciences, Quaid-e-Azam University, has served in Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, has been a member of Labour Expert Group, and of course, many other achievements as well. Also joined here by my fellow colleague, Mr. Saud Bangash Saab, who's a Director, Pakistan Business Council. Really honored to have him here. Also, the collaboration which we have had because of Saud Bangash Saab in this conference that we have had with the Pakistan Business Council. We had his other colleagues also come up. We also have with us Mr. Ali Salman Saab, who's Executive Director of Policy Research Institute of Market Economy, Prime. And I'm also grateful to him, to Ali Salman Saab, for bringing Dr. Khalil over as well, who's a very noted public intellectual in his own right as well. Also honored to have with us Ms. Hiba Zaidi, working with the IFC, also formerly associated with the International Monetary Fund, and of course has a degree from LSC, as many of us know her. I've also been joined by my colleague online, Ms. Komal Shakil, who is an economic policy expert and economist working with the UN, and of course, in the past has been associated with many other assignments related to policy advisory and analysis. So really happy to be here with this panel. Now, as the concept note online showed, we had gone to this very distinguished panel with certain questions, of course, but given that inflation is such a current topic, goes really deep into our lives and impacts the poorest of the poor. So I really don't want to sort of bind them to the questions which have been provided by my colleagues at STPI. And I thought the format that we'll keep is that I'll give them 5 minutes each, maybe 5 to 7 minutes each for their initial remarks. And then, of course, coming to the chair. And then if we have time, I'll come back to them for a second round of questions as well. So with this, I would like to invite from my far left, Mr. Ali Salman Saab, for his initial remarks, please. Ali Saab.
Dr. Waqar. Someone can say also, on the far right side, coming from where Prime is coming, usually perspective. But I'm happy to be on the far left also in that respect. I'm glad that you have given me some liberty to make an opening statement and not following the specific questions. In my opening statement, I'm not going to refer to inflation numbers as such, but I'm just going to share, a policy angle when it comes to inflation. and that too from the administrative side, vis-a-vis price controls. Because this has been, of course, cited as the most important concern from public interest angle, and therefore we see a constant emphasis of all the governments, but including this government, to actually look at inflation and introduce administrative measures to control prices. And when I was looking at collecting my thoughts, I found a very interesting paper, which is actually on more on the economic history. And that, you'll have to believe me, as a paper on price control policy of Alauddin Khilji, which was, of course, Khilji dynasty, who ruled India from 1290 to 1320 AD. And historically, it is noted that Alauddin Khilji's price control measures were very well known, in terms of that, during his 14 years of rule, he was able to keep the prices totally unchanged. And that by that, the prices of grain, the prices of clothes, the prices of daily necessities of life. But then the analysis, which has, I think, some actually implications for the current context, would be very interesting. So according to this paper, which was published by University of Karachi scholar Humayra Naz, the basic motivation of keeping the prices control, which including the wages and salaries and prices of goods and services, was an urban class, including the state officials who were concentrated in the capital or around the capital, Delhi, including, actually, according to this analysis, to keep a large army happy, so that the prices of the goods can be under control. And while he was, during this price control policy, he was quite successful in maintaining the prices. But then there are, of course, the consequences of this price control, which different segments of the population had to bear with. And two things stood out from this analysis. One is that while people in the urban centers enjoyed the low prices, two major segments of the population, namely peasants, farmers, were actually receiving end of this policy. What happened, that since the prices were fixed in the urban areas, the government did not allow, the state did not allow the prices to be risen beyond the margin. The farmers could not make a reasonable profit, and rural poverty in that era multiplied significantly, because they could not make a reasonable profit on their produce. And similarly, the merchants who were actually importing some products, including clothing, goods from other countries, those, even the prices were fixed for such products also. And when the merchants complained to the Sultan Alauddin Khilji that, my profit margin do not allow to sell at this, your prices, I cannot survive. So imagine what Khilji suggested. He said that, don't worry, we will give you a subsidy. And so Sultan Khilji actually made sure that the merchants who were not able to, sell the goods at a competitive rate are not at loss, and the state revenue was used to actually subsidize those merchants. Also, workers, artisans who were selling their services were not allowed to charge their prices. So what happened at the end of that era, according to this analysis, that while this policy was successful and effective in terms of the price control, it had largely a detrimental effect on both the agriculture classes, the rural classes, because they could not profit from their produce and agriculture production fell down. Workers who were dependent on services, and merchants who were dependent on profits also had to suffer a lot. And the state was actually there providing some level of subsidies in the name of welfare, let's say. So when I read this paper, I thought that many of these insights in terms of policies and how bad policies of price control, which are usually implemented in Pakistan in the name of welfare, proved to be actually anti-welfare. Price controls ultimately lead to shortages, black markets, and then it allowed, then it gives the margin to actually a margin to the traders to exploit these uncertain conditions, and the prices go even higher. So therefore, of course, we have been advocating about market freedom, price freedom, to actually drive the policies, not the control. But obviously, if you look at what government is doing, provincial government or federal government is exactly the opposite. They are trying to control prices, whether this is the prices of goods or prices of currencies, and the results are actually opposite in terms of what they intended. So these will be my initial comments. Thank you.
Ali Saab, and I'm glad that you finished on the line that what has been the government's response to inflation, which of course we'll hear later on from Dr. Saab. So with this, I move to Ms. Hiba Zaidi, please.
Thank you, Dr. Bakar. So I will focus more on the supply side or the structural issues in the economy that lead to high cost and translates into prices in the economy. But we need to look at each of the sectors because the reasons for high cost and inflation in each of the sectors is different. For food inflation, the reasons are different. For petroleum prices, the reasons are different. How the government policies lead to inflation in each of these sectors. So if we take the food inflation, which is a key area, even before the commodity prices in the world after COVID, when the world started opening up in 2021 onwards, the food prices in Pakistan were not matching with what the prices were outside. And that had to do with the structural problems, the dysfunctional markets that were there. We are an agrarian economy, but the food markets are completely distorted because of the government policy. But even otherwise, there are structural issues. So for instance, there is up to 50%, even more losses in the perishables from farm to market. So the per unit cost of those fruits and vegetables or other produce increases by the time it reaches market. Then there are no silos that are available. The seeds that are available are not of good quality, so the productivity is low. So per unit cost of the produce, food produce that is there, or other agriculture produce like cotton, automatically increases. Then the issue is what we are producing at farm is not in terms of the quality, and in terms of what we are producing is not matching the trends of the changing consumer trends. So for instance, what we produce, all the lawn fabric and the high-end cotton fabric that we wear in Pakistan most of the year, the cotton that is produced in Pakistan is not what is required for that. A more longer fiber is required for that. So what happens is we end up importing it. And that goes through supply chain, not just for agrarian, but throughout the supply chain. So our exports, for every dollar of exports we do, we end up importing on average 60 to 70 cents of imports. So in the end, the net exports, other than the IT sector, is just 30%. And this model is not sustainable. That's why you see all these balance of payment crises that we just saw this year when the imports were restricted because of FX shortages, that both the imports were not coming in, and then our local domestic manufacturing as well as exports collapsed. And this is a model that creates inflation because you're so dependent on the exchange rate because of domestic factors, but also because of the interest rate hikes for the US dollar. And this is a completely unsustainable model then translates into inflation in the economy. Similarly for food, by the time it reaches to the market, half of it is lost or it has lost its quality. So for instance, even the crisps that we produce, the potatoes that we produce on the farm don't meet the standards of producing crisps in the market. So there is this disconnect. However, blessing in disguise, because of the lockdown that was produced, the farmers realized or our industry realized that they need to forge partnership with downstream. And there are solutions that are available that we can discuss. I can come to that later. Then there are digital solutions that are available, that these agri-tech firms that are hand-holding the farmers and providing digital solutions to produce crop, to keep the quality, to keep these items fresh, and provide direct supply chain from farm to markets to all these metro cash and carries or Carrefours, or so that they exactly know what is required and they exactly produce what is required in the farms. So these are some of the factors that we need to see. Then when you come to the transportation sectors, the transportation sector in Pakistan is one of the most fragmented in the country. If a truck goes from point A to point B, on its way back, it will not know that it will have some goods to carry back from that area, or it will come empty. So what happens, it ends up charging that cost to the person at point A that has hired that truck. There are also digital solutions that are nascent in Pakistan to cut the cost and link those who need the logistics and transportations with the transportation companies, so that when on their way back, they're not coming back empty, and that cuts costs. So and then our policies with regard to the energy sector, how the IPP contracts, the PPAs that are heavily skewed in favor of the energy producers. So what happens is the contracts are the FX dollar pegged. And then what happens is that every time there is a depreciation that happens because of domestic reasons or global fluctuations in US dollar, that directly translate into the cost of energy in Pakistan. Then the contracts that are signed are, there is an upfront payment for a 30-year or 25-year PPP. There's an upfront payment of capacity payments in the first 10 years. That is resulting in exponential increase in the capacity payments for energy. So no matter the fuel part of it, even if it is indigenous, we still have this capacity payments the way these contracts are designed, and that directly translates into. So I think it is very important to look at sector by sector. Monetary policy can be as effective as it can be for more on the demand side, but when it comes to these structural problems in the economy in each of the sectors, some are unique to some sectors. It is really important to look at inflation not as just one CPI, but by sector to sector, what is causing that inflation, and then finding solutions towards that. Thank you.
The equation, and certainly the factors which you have mentioned relate to logistics. Of course, you mentioned the trade side as well and how it has been impacting inflation, energy, of course. So thank you for that perspective. And now I come to Dr. Alia.
Thank you, Dr. Waqar. And I'll begin with a personal note that monetary economics and inflation have a kind of nostalgia for me, because I started my career at Quaid-e-Azam University teaching generations of students monetary economics, and I'm very glad that some of them are in this room working in very senior capacities in their fields in economics also. What I'm going to do is, since I have had the experience of serving on the Monetary Policy Committee of the State Bank of Pakistan for 3 years, and I've had a very close look at how monetary policy decision-making was done. I will try to link that with inflation dynamics. I will try to link that with inflation dynamics. So I used to teach what is called the transmission mechanism of monetary policy, that how does monetary policy or the instruments of monetary policy, here we have the policy rate, which you see in the monetary policy statement as being the major instrument, how that affects inflation. I mean, the transmission mechanism. Now, there are different channels through which monetary policy operates. There's the interest rate channel, which you all know very well, because that is, the top statement of the monetary policy meeting whenever it is held. And these are days of high interest rates. Then there is the balance sheet channel, the asset price channel, and there is the expectations channel, the expectations regarding inflation and interest rate. And that is what I'm going to focus on. That I'll read something, or quote a statement from the latest monetary policy statement, which was released on October 30th, 2023. While core inflation remains sticky, inflation expectations of both consumers and businesses improved in the latest pulse surveys. Now, how do you unpack this statement in terms of how effective is monetary policy action in bringing down inflation from the double-digit figures that it has reached to what the state bank calls its midterm target of 5 to 7% by end 2025. Right now, the headline inflation is about 27%. I think the latest inflation monitor that has come out puts it at that. Core inflation, non-food, non-energy inflation is more sticky and coming down. Now, how does monetary policy action work? The expectations formation mechanism is very technical, and my former student, Dr. Hamza Malik, is in the room. Some of you might talk to him later on. He has remained the Director of Monetary Policy at the State Bank of Pakistan, and I just exchanged some thoughts with him before coming on the stage. And there are some forward-looking agents and some backward-looking agents in the market. Consumers, businesses, both are economic agents. Now, if there are more backward-looking agents in the market as compared to the share of forward-looking agents, then what happens is that there will have to be very, very huge monetary policy contraction to bring inflation down, because agents are forming their expectations based on lagged inflation, which is, in September, headline inflation was around 30%. So in order to bring it down to the range of 5 to 7%, how much of a strict monetary policy would have to be followed? Now, being an economist, or even if you're not an economist, what does restrictive monetary policy do? It raises interest rates, and interest rates then reduce investment spending. The economy contracts. So how much of a contraction in the economy, or how much of a recessionary pressure in the economy will have to be borne as a cost of bringing down inflation when expected inflation is very backward looking. And Dr. Hamza confirmed that about 70% of the agents surveyed through the State Bank in their pulse surveys turn out to be backward looking learners. So they are adapting their inflation expectations based on the previous levels of inflation and not actually taking that much of the prevailing information regarding whatever the State Bank is doing, or there are announcements from the government regarding some other non-monetary measures to control inflation. Hiba has very eloquently, described the cost push inflation scenario. So if the agents are not learning from all that, but they still expect higher levels of inflation, then according to the IMF and the latest publication of the World Economic Outlook has a very good chapter on how soft or hard landings in the economy are brought about when the Central Monetary Authority tries to control inflation through monetary policy action. And I don't see a soft landing for Pakistan in the sense that we are already in single-digit growth rate band. I mean, we cannot afford our GDP growth rate to contract much more than what is being expected. So I'm going to stop here. I just wanted to bring in this feature that inflation dynamics is a subject that is relegated to research theses, and the State Bank also should do a better job at explaining what they mean when they say that expectations have improved. I mean, that is saying nothing about how much restrictive monetary policy will have to be carried out in order to bring down inflation from double-digit to single-digit numbers. Thank you, Dr. Waqar. I might have overshot.
Thank you, Dr. Sahiba, for really explaining the transmission mechanism and the role of expectations in a very non-technical manner, which is actually the purpose of this session. Thank you very much. Only a professor of economics could have done that, so thank you. With this, I come to Mr. Saud Bangash Saab. And of course, a lot of what I think Hiba was suggesting with regards to, of course, the supply side is something that the business community who's on the receiving end, so it would be great to have your perspective, Saud Saab.
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to try and give a practitioner's perspective to the conversation, because the way business looks at the situation is not very different than what a policymaker does, because we're all dealing with the same situation, really. I think the problem in this case is quite deep and quite persistent. The question at hand is that the prescription that's being applied to deal with the basic economic kind of questions, when it relates to curtailing inflation, when it relates to maintaining a stable interest rate, when it relates to providing a stable exchange rate environment for businesses to function and actually get to a point where they're competitive enough to operate in the world market. All of those questions are quite persistent. The way I look at it is that obviously the dichotomy is, when we're reading inflation in Pakistan, is it, like you mentioned, like Hiba mentioned, is it cost push or is it demand driven? And whether, when we apply the, kind of the conventional system of a central bank applying its levers on the economy, does that even deliver? But to that, the answer is not so much. right? Maybe to some degree, but not so much. What we see in our economy is very atypical. Our issue is primarily of economic management, because our problem in the economy are more structural, right? So what happens is that we have a boom-bust cycle, and when we go into a boom, there's creation of this money supply, right? So there's there's more cash injected into the economy. And what happens is that invariably, that wealth that's created actually fuels higher prices, uh, because it fuels more imports. We're an import-driven economy. We make less and we import more. So every time we've created wealth, we've relied on external kind of purchases, and we've run into a balance of payment crisis. And hence we move back to a bust cycle whereby we're short of foreign exchange. We have to cut back our expenditures. We have to go back into a contractionary mode. We increase our interest rates, right? Obviously, inflation is going up as we speak. And then what happens is we expect that the saving rates is going to go up. So what's going to happen is the saving rate will redirect itself into investments, and our productivity will increase. This is what conventional economics will tell us. But this does not happen, because every time the prices increase, two things happen. One, that the higher savings that are created don't actually go back into the economy. Those actually go to the government to pay the fiscal deficit, right? And when the prices go up, instead of the consumer demand going down, it actually fuels the informal economy. So you have more inflow of undocumented goods into the economy. So what are you doing? You're applying a conventional solution to a conventional problem, but your outcome is not what you expect to be. So the answer to a the long-winded answer to this question is that unless we fix the fundamentals of the economy, which means that we improve the tax base, we broaden the tax base, we bring more actors of the economy into the documented space, so that we can track them and they're unable to operate outside the scope of the formal economy, unless we do other measures like we improve our make in Pakistan capacity, so that when those savings are created, they go into the productive space. And we improve our self-reliance in energy, which is, by the way, happening now, because like everyone's talking about how to kind of generate alternate sources of energy, how to improve power drawn from wind and solar and what have you. So those are the kind of measures which will actually help also curtail the inflation. And I'm going to cut my answer short from here. I think what Ali Salman Saab mentioned about price controls, I think that's definitely distortionary for the market. And it also contributes to the bigger problem, which is of high inflation. So I'm going to stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Saud Saab. Really appreciate your response, and of course, bringing in the exchange rate perspective that you very articulately highlighted. With this, if I could go on to Ms. Komal Shakil, who's joining us online.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So I just wanted to ask if I'm loud and clear and audible before
Yes.
So thank you for having me, Dr. Bakar, and I'm just pleased to see all of my colleagues raise some very good points. It's hard to now add in value, given that so many important points have already been made. By most of the list that I had is kind of exhausted. Just to recap, we've talked about the supply side. Hiba has very pertinently raised points about how COVID has impacted our supply chains and has pushed the cost up. I had a few points regarding just to recap on what I understand Pakistan's inflation problem to be. Firstly, we are an oil import dependent economy. So when global oil prices rise, we get to bear the brunt of it, and that also contributes. So it's apart from the structural problems that South has raised very effectively, these are one of the things externally that are affecting us. Of course, Hiba also touched upon the energy prices, partly due to the programs of the IMF programs that we've been part of. So we didn't really have a choice in bringing those up. But I'm not, and of course, exchange rate fluctuations has been talked about, supply chain disruptions have been talked about. So I'm not going to go deep into that, but I will build on the point that South has actually raised about the fundamentals and the need to bring in new actors, which is something that I also feel we need to do, because the state, we have a set menu for policies that the state can incorporate. And it's about time that we bring in, a variety of actors to help solve the problem. Instead of delving more into why we have inflation, I wanted to kind of propose some solutions. I'll give a brief outline on two things. Firstly, I want to talk about the linkages that we can create in our value chains or in our supply chains. Secondly, I want to talk about innovative financing that can bridge the gap, for private sector engagement within this whole context, which I feel is lacking. So let me build on the supply chain parts. So when I talk about introducing the new actors, I'm basically talking about bringing in the private sector and maybe create partnerships with development partners as well. In the case of Pakistan, it is a very important player. We have a lot of resource being mobilized through these development partners. So my point of view in this situation is, if we are going to start thinking about solutions, let's start thinking about also bringing in a diversity of actors into the picture. So just an example I wanted to share with you about supply chains and how, especially for SME in Pakistan, for example, there's a lot of potential in the SME sector, which is untapped. And one of the case studies I wanted to bring in was the Taobao villages in China. So they were able to tap into that side of their economy and use it to reduce poverty alleviation too, just by bringing in more connection between the government and local entrepreneurs. So in China, I'm sure if there are some people who are aware of it, but for those, maybe for someone who's new to this concept, it's basically it's a village where 50 households are operating their own shops on Taobao. Taobao is like an online platform where it's an e-commerce platform where you can have shops and you can sell all types of products, including agriculture products, including any arts and crafts, anything that you're producing on an SME level, on a micro cottage industry level, you can sell it there. And the government is integrating, these clusters, these villages, these clusters in ways so that they can tap into not just the larger market within the country, but also outside of China. So I'll just give out a few figures because they are just amazing in the way they have changed China. So about in 1 year, from 2019 to 2020, some 4,000 went from some 4,000 villages. It has gone down to some 5,500 villages, and they are producing over 100 million, or there is some 300 million transaction volume. And overall, it is contributing to poverty reduction into a large portion of the GDP. So one of the ways that the government has helped these entrepreneurs is that local government has stepped in. And in Pakistan, I think this is a very relevant case study because we are also experimenting with how we can decentralize, how we can make sure that we are reaching the local supply chains to the local government. So I think this is a great example where the local government in China was basically facilitating these entrepreneurs through e-commerce centers and through having exhibition halls. So all the marketing support you can get. For example, they would be helping them produce their ads, if they're selling on Instagram, how to engage with customers. So this kind of digitalization into small and medium-sized enterprises, and then also providing them a platform to exhibit their goods, so that in case there is some global demand or global buyer or global actor, it can impact or they can reach them through these things. So one of the things that I wanted to build upon Hiba's point about creating leakages is that we have to build that ecosystem within the private sector, within the supply chains that we have, so that we are able to meet the quality standards, and of course we need some technical assistance on that with regards to maybe support from the government, maybe support from within the private sector. For example, large scale organizations can also help build businesses within their value chains so that they can become more effective in terms of producing high quality goods, in terms of meeting global standards, in terms of understanding how they can improve their product and create value added products. Another thing I wanted to discuss is basically financial innovation. But before that, I wanted to highlight a few figures relating to private sector credit. For example, we have the bulk of private credit being lent to the sovereign. Only 26.2% credit from the banks is lent to the private sector. So there is a huge financing gap. And if using this whole point about how we bring in solutions, I'll also bring in the angle of sustainable development. So if we are talking about long-run reforms to get out of this structural whole problem about the boom and bust cycle that South mentioned very effectively, we have to invest into long-term reforms. And one of them is about creating access to finance for private sector. But since we are already struggling with that, I think it's about time we bring in private sector from outside of Pakistan. So this is a great way. So I want to talk about impact bonds here. Impact bonds is also one of the ways in which you can bring private sector from anywhere in the world and help them make partnerships with private sector here and look at sustainable development issues. I would encourage, maybe I don't know how much time we have, but if we get into this, I can explain the structure of the impact bond or similar financial products later on. But just to cut it short, it's basically where you can form a syndicate or a consortium of private investors. Someone takes the risk, invests in a sustainable issue, which also has a profit side to it or a profit incentive to it. For example, Starbucks is doing this. They are investing in effective sustainable farming for their coffee farmers, so that they can not only have a future income, but also because it improves the quality of their product and their whatever product they're using to generate income. So this is one of the ways we can bring in a variety of actors, put them in a platform where they can create partnerships and solve this problem when it comes to access to finance. Because this is one of the key issues, apart from other so many issues that we have discussed, one of the key issues which stops the private sector from improving the ecosystem of their supply chains. So many times you know what you want to do, but you don't have access to finance in the country. So it may not be such a big problem for large organizations or large profit-making entities, but for small to medium-sized entities, this is a problem. So just to summarize on what my point is, basically, I wanted to focus on solutions related to improving the ecosystem for our value chains, supply chains, and also bring in some financial innovation models so we can fill in the gap, the private sector, the credit gap that exists in the country. So I think my angle is more towards looking at the solutions, and because my capable colleagues have already very well articulated all the causes that Pakistan, all the causes of inflation that Pakistan is going through. So yeah, I'd leave the floor to our other colleagues, and I think I'll end my point here. And if there are any questions.
Thank you, Komal. Really appreciate you have actually made my task easier, because in the second round I had to go back to my panel for the solutions part, of course, given that they have excellently diagnosed the problem, and you have already given some solutions on the table. But before I go back to the panel for their second round, of course, maybe I would like to encourage our esteemed guests over here, our audience over here, in case they would like to come in. I do see two segments over here which are not represented on the panel. One is the members of academia, and the other is members of media, whom I do see in the audience. So if anybody would like to ask a question or share their thoughts, please, please.
This round completed and have a longer Q&A.
We can have that, certainly, certainly.
Right.
So as the chair has advised, we'll let the panelists finish off this round, and then we'll come to you. So as I said, we'll just focus on the solutions part, and maybe the two aspects which were given in the questions, that what needs to be done. Number one, for the poorest of the poor segment, the role of social protection here, for example. Of course, we are under a fund program, so the role of production subsidies is going to be very limited. Then there's role of technology, which was there in the concept note. We have seen that in times of COVID, we utilize food supply dashboards, for example, for timely access, if there are other examples. And I think, as Komal said, the role of local governments. At some level, of course, political governments will continue to use price controls, even if they are distortive. And therein, of course, comes the role of local government as well. So would you like to go first, please? Please.
जी हो गया ठीक बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम Dr. Bakar and other organizers of STPI conference, very grateful that you have given me this chance to share my views on this burning issue. Clearly this is something that has not affected us in our previous history as much as it has done over the last 2 years. Double-digit inflation, that too in the 20s or even bordering on 30s, was unheard of. So this is indeed an occasion where all minds should debate what has gone wrong with our economy, which has produced such a unusual outcome. And obviously, this is hurting undoubtedly to our poorest segments. I commend all the speakers before me, Ali Salman, Hiba Zaidi, Dr. Alia, Pankaj Saab, and Komal Shakil Sahiba. Very, very good contributions have come from these. In fact, if you would agree, Dr. Bakar, that they have given many different perspectives. Each is relevant. Somewhere it is macroeconomy that is important, somewhere monetary policy that is important. And I'm glad to see 2 or 3 contributions relating to market efficiencies and related things, which we can all say the supply side. I'm intrigued that Ali Salman started with the example of Alauddin Khilji back in towards the end of 13th and early 14th century in India. And he had an extremely elaborate system of price controls and stocking of goods. And as he said, that this could be related to keeping those segments of population happy, who obviously were very important, like his troops and other government officials, etc. And there is, I will give you this reference, Qasim Mahmood Farishta. That book is Tarikh-e-Farishta. It has been translated in Urdu also. And it's a fairly non-standard way of writing history compared to what historiographers will say today, how history should be written. And that is I mean, acknowledged style. So he has covered from Ghaznavi until the advent or end of Akbar. He has given complete details of what prices were there. So it was a very extensive system. Now, obviously, he has picked up that out of this, there were shortages for or welfare of farmers and merchants was affected, and merchants were somehow vocal and their voice reached him and he started subsidizing them for whatever profit loss they had. Clearly, any system of controls will require some kind of compensation. But look, let me tell you, I mean, we are, the fundamental point to address is undoubtedly, this is a distortion. Let me also quote from Islam. The people of Medina came to Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said, "O Prophet of Allah, the prices in Medina have risen unreasonably, and fix the prices so that people's life would be eased." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "I will not do it, because I don't want to rise before my Allah where somebody will raise an objection against my conduct, that I have fixed a price which did not meet the cost, or enabled some to sell at prices which were not desirable, etc." So this is the position on the price control from the conduct of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But at the same time, there is no book on fiqh in Islam which would not list in the duties of whoever is the ruler to go and regularly visit bazaars and check prices. See, the distortion does not come simply because there is a control. The distortion also comes when there is a monopolistic power. Distortion also comes when you take advantage of somebody's ignorance. And these are the type of things which are market enabling. It will bring efficiency in the market and will help improve overall welfare. So my first thing, and I think I would be echoing some of the speakers who have spoken to this thing, that market monitoring is essential, and that we have failed in that. But I am also allowing, and we should all be mindful of the fact, there is a significant part, and the researchers can identify the contribution of what is called imported inflation. This inflation phenomena started with the Ukraine war and the price of oil and price of other commodities. They skyrocketed. And this is an inflation in which Pakistan is not alone. Some countries have done very well. Our neighbor India has done well. But everywhere, most of the countries, America is now doing well. The entire Europe, UK, Turkey, they have experienced 5-6 years ago, European Union had negative interest rates. There was no inflation. And now their inflations are 5%, 6%, 7%, and so on, which is like sky falling on them. So we exclude that component of inflation which is driven, and that's a very large component, from imported or exogenous factors. But there is considerable inflation, which many people have termed a supply side thing. And you know, in this debate of supply versus demand side inflation, the monetarists, monetary policy people I mean, they win the day because they are the ones who are coming and teaching this thing. So our arguments they carry no weight. It is they decide. This whole thing of inflation monitoring as a religion has been imposed under the patronage of the IMF. And obviously, we have also accepted this thing because we had no ability to evade this thing. Now, so coming to the things that we can do, and many people have spoken about this. You see, there is a huge component, and I think Komal has very eloquently given the example of China. The middlemen in our midst, and there the Aradhyas, look at the difference between wholesale market and the retail market. We do it every meeting of ECC, and we have done in the past far more regularly. And you will see glaring differences, as much as 50%, 60%, the prices consumers paying in urban areas, Karachi, for instance, or even in Islamabad, or in some places in Rawalpindi and Lahore as well. So the degrees may change. So these people, the middleman, has a great deal of control. And if we can devise the scheme that she has mentioned out of Chinese experience, that would be great. Some financing. The value chain has to be established. Now, value chain things are getting better and better. You know, there is the cold chain so that these things can be carried and the wastage can be avoided. But there is also the need for storage. Okay. And we have had many policies, but somehow the impetus has not taken off. The storage capacity and a financing system of storage, State Bank, I was back in 2016, it was finalized and notified also, but you don't hear much about it. It means it hasn't taken off. So the government stocks remain vulnerable. You hear in Sindh and in some part of Punjab also, the wheat, which is lying there for several years, the rats are chewing it away. Those things are missing, and government should do this thing. You know, in the local government system, price monitoring committees were elected bodies. Somehow we have reversed that thing. So local body is the crux or is the key. Without having local bodies, no government, federal or provincial, will have the ability to get down to the place of action. The local government is the one who sees with its own eyes the actions. So we need to establish that. And obviously, the delinquents should be taken to task. There should be penalties that they should face. And finally, I will say that inflation obviously has had a role in kind of affecting poverty. We have a very, very good program, BISP, and the coverage has been increased to 7 million households out of 36, maybe some more can come in. Also, the technology is now allowing us to get to know each and every individual in the country. And the provincial governments are doing some work to bring a profile. Even BISP has done a great deal of the scorecard methodology allows to appreciate what kind of life these people, these families are spending and what their needs are. So in the first round, Dr. Saab, I stop it here, and then I'm sure your participants will like to comment and ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So with your permission, sir, क्योंकि फिर बाद में time नहीं होगा, हम एक दफा questions लेके फिर एक ही दफा panel की तरफ आते हैं, क्योंकि we have the next session will require the hall from us at 2 p.m. So we have a mobile mic if somebody would like to come in here. So you could raise your hands because you may not, I can see Saihan, yes. Then Dr. Arif.
Thank you so much. I am here just behind of all desk. I am Uruj Reza Sayame, a journalist working with BBC World. I have a question if you can see me. I have a question why the link between academia and market is missing. Why I don't see any student entrepreneur working on her initiatives in the market. So what is missing actually in the market?
Ji, thank you. Noted, Ji. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Waqar. So I'm Sehan Mohammed. I'm from the IMF, but disclaimer right off the bat, none of my views or questions represent that of my institution. And my question is specifically for Dr. Alia, who highlighted perhaps one of the transmission mechanisms of monetary policy that we rarely talk about in Pakistan, and my question relates to that as well. So as you mentioned, I've seen these monetary policy statements where they mention the role of expectations, but then my observation is that the monetary policy decision-making doesn't heavily rely on these expectations, unlike, say, the Fed or the ECB would, where the governor specifically mentions these inflation expectations in the speeches or the minutes of their meeting. Secondly, as you mentioned, that most of these surveys have a higher percentage of backward-looking agents. I don't know whether you implied this, but so please correct me if I'm wrong, but the implication was that there should be more forward-looking agents because the size of the adjustment then perhaps would less. But my question is that if the market specifically is forming their view on backward-looking data, then perhaps their consumption and investment patterns are that way. So rather than thinking that perhaps they could move on to the forward data, why don't the SPP perhaps base their decisions on the backward-looking agents, because that's how the market perceives.
Thank you. So we'll come back to the response. Dr. Arif.
My name is Arif, and I introduce myself. I'm a passionate teacher that teaching at National Islamic University. So I can simply recall from this.
So I think on the first question, so we at least have one academic here working on this.
Thank you, Dr. Waqar. Thank you, Dr. Waqar, for highlighting this thing. I can recall my early economics books in which the author mentioned that it's a hydra-headed monster, meaning that there are many heads that you can't use one tool to manage this one. Like, for example, if we talk about in the interest rate, that most of the we can see that the governments, including the banks as well, they are relying on. But we know that it is anti-growth. But at the same time, if you look at our economy, it is more cash-driven economy. So if you are only raising the interest, that how it is going to control this aspect. Same is the case when we know that the government is the largest borrower that from the banks. Then again, it's a questionable that how only interest rate can address this one. My second comment is that I am more from business side and from entrepreneur side, that it's always good to see crisis as an opportunity. That opportunity to, like, for example, opportunity to pursue efficiency. For example, we know that most of these developed economies, they are gaining more growth based on better utilization of their existing resources than producing more. One side. Second is that, as mentioned very rightly by Hiba, that to reduce wastages, that it's another opportunity to do this thing. Third thing, that to pursue more cashless economy. That can help us in future.
Yeah.
That if we are going to manage through interest, that can contribute. Fourth, to broaden the tech stack, that the structural issue that we have been experiencing. And the fifth one, that is with respect to gray economy, that yesterday, that when I was teaching, and once one of my students, he was always on mobile phone, and this is always quite irritating for the teacher. That, and then I asked that what you are doing, and his fellow students, his fellows informed me that he is selling Iranian goods online. And that really shocked me.
In the classroom.
That how this thing is penetrating, that gray economy, that how it is taking different forms. So we need to look at this as an opportunity to address those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. So maybe one final comment, Vasif.
Thank you very much. Just referring back to Mr. Saud Bangish, this very morning I was attending another session. I'm here. Yeah. So this morning I was attending another session on the governance approach, where Moeed Yusuf Saab said that that mere relying on taxes cannot resolve the economic problems. So it's not about taxes, probably there is much more to be done. And referring back to which Ms. Hiba Zedi said, would you please share with us a couple of digital solutions which you were referring to? That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. So, so maybe with the permission of chair, I do see two more hands going up.
Please,
It
let
should
them
be
ask.
थोड़ा सा time शायद over हो जाए. So I see Dr. Sajid Amin at the back and Engineer Jabbar Saab in the front. So mic जिसके भी पास हो, यहाँ पहले सामने ले आए. Jabbar Saab को दे. So maybe a short comment, you know.
Yeah, for sure. You see, before you ask me to stop, I will stop. Okay. Having said so, I think I've been in trade politics for the last 25 years. And Dr. Waqar Saab, our finance secretary, and in so many capacities, we used to have discussions. And also, I can also acknowledge that a lot of work has been done by PBC in this regard. My question is very simple. You see, I've been wondering, Hamza Malik is also here, so I'm saying we know all each. From Dr. Alia particularly, you said that you worked 15 years, if I have correctly heard, you see, in the MPS committee, you see, or okay, 3 years, okay. Having said so, my question is very simple. It will only consume 1 minute. That while taking such a painful, you see, decision of increasing the discount rates in your working, why it remains regardless, or it is a very less weightage of declining investments, which are very much important, and the deindustrialization. As per report of PBC, 2007, 18.1% GDP manufacturing. Now it's just coming down of 13%. And all the evidences show that while in working of a discount rate or announcing, it appears either these two elements of non-consideration towards the required increase in investment and industrialization either have no weightage, or you people deliberately take it out because you are made subject of certain, you know, for example,
Right.
formation of opinion, which you may have to make. It's finished.
So, thank you, sir. So,
Last question.
Dr. Saab, I'll just give it to Dr. Khalil Saab, if that's okay.
Allow me to raise my question in Urdu because I am from the other end of the tunnel. सवाल नहीं है एक
Only the foreigners in the room won't understand. Okay.
अच्छा सवाल नहीं है ये फ्रेडरिक हाइक की थ्योरी है थ्योरी ऑफ डिस्पर्स्ड नॉलेज वो थ्योरी ना भी हो तो हम जितने लोग यहाँ बैठे हैं वी ऑल हैव इम्परफेक्ट नॉलेज इंक्लूडिंग दिस पैनल इंक्लूडिंग डॉक्टर वकार मसूद साहब तो अगर मार्केट में कोई इंडिविजुअल या ग्रुप ऑफ इंडिविजुअल कोई गलत फैसला करता है तो उसके नतायज उन्हें भुगतने पड़ते हैं लेकिन जब गवर्नमेंट में बैठा एक शख्स जो मिनिस्टर है या एडवाइज़र है या प्राइम मिनिस्टर है या सदर है या फिनांस सेक्रेटरी है जो भी है उसका भी नॉलेज इम्परफेक्ट है उतना ही तो जब वो गलत फैसले करता है तो वो गलत फैसलों के नताइज तो करोड़ों लोगों को भुगतने पड़ते हैं तो हाउ टू रिजॉल्व दिस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट थैंक यू
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So सब पैनल की रिस्पॉन्स ले लें जी जी ठीक है जी so maybe 2 minutes each because of lack of time. Thank you.
Audible? I think when we comes to the market, we ये gray market की भी बात होती है, middleman की भी बात होती है अक्सर. Maybe ये दोबारा बात हुई. And I like to just give two examples, two different kind of product segments, and decide for yourself. For instance, look at the clothing markets, men and women clothing, different varieties, different qualities. ये जो remember the slogan also, the roti kapda makka. The main concern was prices, right? The prices and also the accessibility. But is there any authority or monitoring mechanism today needed to monitor the prices of clothing? No, right? We have substitutes for each segment of our income groups, and we don't need to monitor the prices. But on the other hand, we have all kind of monitoring mechanisms in the food market, where government keeps on intervening, thinking that it will lead to the welfare, but it doesn't. So that's the point. I think again I'll refer that in these scenarios actually sometimes the gray market, the informal market, may be a savior for a large segment of the population where the government is not effectively reaching. And lastly, I think we don't need monitoring mechanism as long as there is open competition and the trade and production systems are without any hindrances. Thank you.
Thank you. Hiba.
I'll come to the examples that I was asked for that exist, the digital solutions that exist. So in agriculture space, there are digital solutions such as there is a think tank that they call themselves by the name of Agriculture Republic. They have established the first digital information hub called Digital Data. So what they do is, and I think one aspect that hasn't been highlighted is in terms of food inflation is very intrinsically linked to the food security. And given that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, we will need to very quickly adapt to more climate smart agriculture, because otherwise we will see very heavy losses whenever these climatic events happen. One happened last year, drought, heat, and floods. So what they do is they provide digital solutions in terms of early warning systems. And so to mitigate any losses that are happening, that could happen as a result of those climatic events. And also what they do is there is another startup by the name of Taza. What they do is they handhold the farmers and provide them with knowledge to produce climate smart, adopt climate smart techniques, but also link them directly to Al-Fatah stores like this, directly from farm to markets. What it does is it reduces the cost, it reduces the losses that does from farm to market, and in turn it provides a very good price to not only to the farmers, but it's essentially it is eliminating that middleman. And they are providing the technical know-how as well to transferring that knowledge to produce crops that per unit cost is low and the losses are also low. So those are some of the digital solutions. And then there are many like that. There is a platform called Sarsabs Pakistan. They have actually collaborated with students in academia at NAST, PARC, NARC, NAST, and LUMS. And they, according to the research that they have learned, the examples from all over the world on climate smart agriculture, other good techniques that our farmers can employ, they directly work from on farms and inculcate that, transfer that knowledge to the farmers. Another example that I would like to give is a University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, is also sent thousands of their students on the farm to inculcate all productivity enhancing through use of simple technology that is not expensive. So how to reduce water wastage, how to use pesticides, fertilizers in a way that they can increase their productivity, reduce cost, and reduce losses from farm to market. In the logistics space, I think IFC actually worked with this company called Trucker, which operates in the Middle East, and through their partner in Pakistan, Truck Share, to provide a model. It is Uber for trucks. So essentially, they link shippers to the trucking fleets, and those are most of the trucking fleets in Pakistan are small. They are SMEs, so 80% of them are SMEs. So what it does is it provides a platform. Not only does it provide price predictability, but also schedule predictability, and in turn it reduces cost and truck sharing. So for example, you may not need the whole truck, but through this digital app, you can hire a truck. It's like an Uber pool for freight forwarding and logistics. So there are many examples like this that are not perhaps so much highlighted. The solutions already exist, and of course we can learn from the regional players as well. These are not very high-end technology solutions. Some of them don't even require a smartphone. They just require a normal phone.
In the interest of time, I may have to confine you, but thank you for mentioning Agricultural Republic, because we had a presentation from them yesterday. So I'll encourage our esteemed audience to see their recording from yesterday. And the CEO of Digital Data also presented their model. So thank you for highlighting that. Dr. Alia, please.
Yeah, I'm going to club both the questions that were directed to me, because essentially both are of the same nature. When I talked about expectations, I was not assuming that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomena, because the information set that the economic agents use to formulate their expectations of where prices are going should include information about the real sector of the economy. And I think this has been a very, I would say, innovative panel in the sense of discussing inflation, that it has focused both on the demand management policies, that is the monetary policy, as well as the supply side policies relating to better productivity and removing the obstacles and the constraints to the functioning of markets that also lead to their impact on prices. And I'm reminded actually of Amartya Sen's seminal work on the famine of Bengal, according to which it was all a supply management issue. So we need to give, proportionate weight to both the demand side as well as the supply side. Engineer Saab, the issue of the manufacturing sector of Pakistan is obviously very relevant to this price spiral in Pakistan, but we don't have the time to debate it here. In all fairness, I would say that the Monetary Policy Committee has a multi-sectoral model that it uses, and the real sector is also mentioned in the monetary policy statement always. So I think we need more data science, we need more artificial intelligence and all the digital tools to better manage our demand side as well as our supply side, so that the information sets are better and the quality of information in that sets is also flowing from better real sector outcomes.
Thank you, Dr. Saud Saab, please.
No, it's working. It's working. All right, 3 points from my side. One, someone asked the question, what's missing in the market? What's really missing is the underlying kind of climate. There are people, there are businesses, there are market actors who are trying to do what they have to do to operate in the market. They're bringing in new solutions, but the institutional climate that they're offered or they have available, it really doesn't help them out, right? So that's one thing. It also relates to the fact that even though we may feel that we may come out of the kind of the bust cycle and move towards the boom cycle, that's almost like an illusion, right? Because we're just waiting for the next bust cycle to happen again. The foundational defect in our economic kind of condition isn't addressed. And what that defect is, like I said earlier, we're an import-reliant country. We do not manufacture. We're not self-reliant. We do not have sufficient export competitiveness. Hence, we cannot earn enough to pay our bills. So hence, eventually, we will run into the same problem. So what's missing is the underlying. That's your trying to answer your question.
Thank you.
Second point was the governance, right? Because he asked a specific question. Governance relying on taxes will not solve the problem, right? So taxes is not about, what I said was broadening the tax base. It didn't mean particularly to increase the revenue. Increasing revenue is important, but broadening the tax base also means you're documenting the economy. There's a lot of systems that are connected with the tax system, right? If you're providing social security, you don't have to go survey 16 million people. You can go to your tax system and say, please find of the people who have less than 100,000 rupees of income or 300,000 rupees of income annually. You do not have to go do surveys. If you're collecting certain fees, you do not have, each institution does not have to go independently. So it creates efficiency in the market and also kind of fends off the undocumented part of the economy. So having a tax system is a bedrock. Last point, and I will stop there, I promise, is about our regulatory framework, right? So we talked about price controls. Now, if we talk about, for example, if we're talking about the market, right? So how is the market regulated? So there's different regulators all around. I can speak specifically of the market committees, for example. Now, at every level of the market, there's a lot of red tapeism, right? Now, we have to speak about this because even though this may seem completely irrelevant to inflation, but it relates to the efficiency of the market. If there's red tape in the market, that would stop market actors to enter the market. So with that, I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, कोमल से 1 मिनट की response लेना sir.
अच्छा, चलें, जल्दी.
जी.
1 मिनट.
जी. Komal, over to you, please. Literally 1 minute.
I'll actually yield my time because there was no specific question for me. And I think everybody else has done such a good job commenting, so I'll save your time.
So with this, I give it to the chair.
Thank you for your generosity. अच्छा, ये खलील साहब, मैं नहीं समझता कि मैं पूरी तरीके से आपकी बात को समझा हूँ, लेकिन अगर आपने ये कहा कि भाई नामुकम्मल मालूमात होती है, हर किसी के पास भी मुकम्मल मालूमात नहीं है, और अगर वो फर्द होता है तो उसको नुकसान उठाना पड़ता है, लेकिन अगर ये चीज कौमी सतह पे चली जाए, हुकूमत में चली जाए, फिर क्या किया जाए? देखें, मतलब अगर जितना अहम फर्द होगा और उसके पास मालूमात नहीं होंगी, उतना ही नुकसान उठाना पड़ेगा। और साथ में ये भी है कि देखिए, नामुकम्मल मालूमात होने का ये मतलब नहीं है कि आपने अंधे होकर फैसले करने। नामुकम्मल मालूमात का जो हल है वो मालूमात को जमा करना है, और बहुत सारी मालूमात होती हैं। अगर आप अच्छी तरीके से मेहनत करें, यहाँ सब रिसर्चर्स बैठे हुए हैं और जानते हैं कि मालूमात ज्यादा हैं, उसको इस्तेमाल करने वाले कम हैं। तो यही जो है शायद ये इम्परफेक्ट और नामुकम्मल एक ही चीज है। ये फिर कोई और दूसरा वो कर लेंगे, ठीक है ना? आप बता दें इम्परफेक्ट को क्या कहते हैं?
सर उसको bilateral ले लेंगे सर.
चलिए, ओके जी, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया.
Sir, thank you very much. And with this, I thank all our audience. We'll have our next sessions starting at 3 p.m. I guess. I look forward to welcoming all of you in those sessions, and we'll move to lunch now. Thank you, sir.